They drained 42,000 gallons from my lake in a single morning, said it was for community landscaping. I watched the gauge spin like a stopwatch, bleeding my property value, $1 at a time, $37,200 to be exact, and I hadn't even received the notice yet. Welcome to my channel. I'm Daniel Knox, a civil engineer from Greenville, South Carolina, and I tell real stories about HOAs that forget they're not above the law. If you're new here, grab your coffee, subscribe, and let me know, where are you watching from tonight? The trucks were lined up before sunrise, their pumps whining like mosquitoes on caffeine. I stepped out barefoot, holding a mug that read "World's Okayest Dad," steam curling into the damp air. The HOA president, Marlene Carter, waved a clipboard like a royal decree and shouted, "You weren't using it anyway, Daniel. We're taking this for irrigation." The words hung there, absurd and heavy. My pond wasn't decorative. It was the reservoir my late wife and I built 10 years ago with a permit that still bore her name. I could still hear her laugh echo from the dock the day we filled it for the first time. When she passed, I promised my daughter I'd keep it just the way Mom left it, clean, open, peaceful. Now diesel engines were shredding that promise. I called across the gravel, trying to keep my voice level. "You don't have jurisdiction here, Marlene. That's private land." She smirked. Not for long. The board voted 4-1 to annex the parcel for shared resource management. Annex. A word that sounded bureaucratic until you watched it drain your memories. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, legal pads scattered around like storm debris. My friend Eddie, a retired county clerk who smelled permanently of pipe tobacco and WD-40, dropped by uninvited. "You keep every permit?" he asked. I nodded. "Box in the attic, labeled A zoning." He grinned. Easy, but sharp. Then you've got them by the throat. Start with the parcel map. Find the meets and bounds language. Most of these HOAs forget where their lines actually end. That night, under a buzzing attic bulb, I dug through brittle folders. My wife's handwriting appeared on a 2009 survey. Parcel 14B, 0.78 acres, private water feature, non-transferable. My throat tightened. They had no right, but proving it would take more than outrage. It would take precision. Eddie called the next morning. "You'll need a real estate attorney, someone who knows HOA covenants like scripture." He gave me a name, Carmen Ruiz, partner at Whitfield Knox LLP, former HOA board member turned reformer. I emailed her scans before lunch, each PDF stamped and notarized, one page after another like ammunition loading into a chamber. By sunset, she replied, "Daniel, they overreached. The CCRs end 18 feet short of your shoreline, and your easement gives you exclusive use rights to all subsurface and surface water within that boundary. That means every gallon they took is theft, not management. Let's meet tomorrow." I exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. But Carmen warned me, don't confront them yet. They'll circle wagons, call emergency sessions, try to bury evidence. So I watched instead, took photos, logged times, recorded pump gauges from my porch. South Carolina's a one-party consent state, perfectly legal. Knowledge nugget number 1. HOA authority stops where the recorded plat stops. Anything beyond that line is just noise on letterhead. For a week I said nothing, even when Marlene's husband posted on Nextdoor that I was hoarding natural resources. Classic projection. The neighborhood grapevine crackled. Some sided with me, others whispered about that engineer who won't share. My daughter, 12 and precocious, asked one night, "Dad, are they stealing from us?" I swallowed. "They're confused, honey, but confusion can be fixed." She believed me, so I had to make that true. I drove to the county recorder's office, the fluorescent light flat and humming, and pulled the chain of title myself. Each deed stacked over decades, farm, subdivision, HOA formation, until one signature caught my eye. Transfer exception, water feature rights retained by private lot holder. That clause was older than the HOA itself. I took photos, labeled them, filed them into a binder thick enough to bruise. I knew this wasn't over, but I was starting to understand the terrain. If you've ever faced an HOA like this, tell me in the comments, are you firmly anti-HOA, or do you think some can still serve their communities? Either way, share one tactic you'd give someone fighting back. And if you're on a board yourself, yes, I see you reading, leave your message for us here. That night, rain hit the tin awning, rhythmic and slow. I stared at the dark lake, half its depth gone, banks cracked like old leather. I promised quietly, to no one in particular, I'll refill it, legally, completely, and publicly. And from that vow came the first real step, finding out exactly how much water they'd taken, and who paid for it. The next morning, I stood by the half-empty shoreline, a tape measure dangling from my hand like a limp flag. The water had dropped another 8 inches overnight. The pumps were still gone, but I could smell the diesel in the soil. I snapped photos at 7:14 a.m., 7:29 a.m., and 7:45 a.m., time-stamped, geotagged, every angle documented. Carmen always said, "Paper beats noise, Daniel. Build your paper wall first." At her downtown office, she slid the binder back to me. "You're in the clear," she said, pushing her glasses up with an ink-stained knuckle. "But we'll need an engineer's report proving their runoff system relies on your pond. Otherwise, they'll spin this as community necessity." "I can run the analysis myself," I told her. "Hydrology's my lane." She smiled. "Good. I'll prep a cease and desist, but we hold it until the board doubles down. They always do." By that weekend, Marlene did exactly that. An email blast hit every homeowner. Phase 2, irrigation expansion, shared benefit initiative. They even attached a grainy aerial photo labeling my property Reservoir A. I read it twice, my pulse drumming. She wasn't just stealing water, she was rewriting history. Eddie leaned on my porch rail, sipping his thermos coffee. "You ready for this to get ugly?" "Already is," he chuckled. "They'll send code enforcement next. They think citations scare people faster than truth." He was right. 2 days later, I found a yellow slip on my mailbox. "Unapproved structure, dock violation, $250 fine." The ink wasn't even dry. Then came the others. Lawn height, lighting angle, mailbox paint tone. 4 in 1 week. Knowledge nugget number 1 was already paying off. Jurisdiction lines matter. I took each notice, photographed it against my property stake markers, then filed a certified dispute letter within 48 hours. Never missed a deadline. HOAs feed on missed deadlines. Halfway through drafting the 5th letter, I paused. It wasn't about fines anymore. It was about control. They wanted me exhausted before I found leverage. If you've ever been swarmed with petty HOA citations, tell me, what's the most ridiculous one you've seen? Post it below so others can learn the patterns. Some of these boards monitor comments. Might as well give them reading material. Carmen looped in a contact of hers, Leo Benton, a civil inspector who moonlighted as a compliance consultant. He met me at the pond with a clipboard and a laser level. "Their irrigation lines cross this boundary by 32 feet, he said. "That's trespass, plain and simple. And look, no backflow prevention. County Code 48112. If fertilizer ever backsiphons, they are liable." He wrote up a preliminary memo. I could almost feel the balance shifting. That evening, I received an anonymous text from a local number. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." I showed it to Eddie, who laughed. "They're scared. Means you're close." Close was an understatement. The next morning, I followed the irrigation line past the trail behind Lot 7 and found something the HOA definitely didn't want on record. An unpermitted pump shed, padlocked but humming faintly. I recorded video, narrating date, time, and GPS coordinates, then emailed it to Carmen. Her reply was instant. "Perfect. Keep it secure. Don't confront. We'll let them build their own record of violations." For 3 weeks, I let them believe I was cornered. Fines piled up to $1,250. A smear post accused me of eco-selfishness. I documented every word. Meanwhile, Leo quietly filed his inspection report with the county water division. Time-stamped, notarized. The fuse was lit. Late one Friday, I saw Marlene at the cul-de-sac with her board members, pointing at my property and laughing. She caught my eye. "You can't win, Daniel. We've got votes." "Votes aren't ownership," I said, and walked inside before the anger cracked through my calm. Carmen's next call came Sunday night. "We're moving to Phase 2, she said. "You'll need a holding company." I frowned. "For what?" "To buy something they don't realize they're standing on." And that's when the plan began to crystallize. The slow, surgical kind of justice. The holding company Carmen mentioned was her specialty. Clean, legal, and invisible. She called it Riverbend Commons LLC, registered out of Charleston with me as managing member. Its purpose? To quietly acquire a thin strip of land the HOA board believed was common property. A 15-foot drainage easement that connected their irrigation pipe to county land. On paper, it was a forgotten remnant of the original subdivision plat, a sliver no one had bothered to maintain. I drove down to the county surplus office on a Tuesday afternoon, humid and still. The clerk, a woman with silver hair and a nervous laugh, handed me the file. "Nobody's touched this in 15 years, she said. "You're sure you want it? It's just gravel and pipe." "Exactly," I said, and paid $400 in filing and transfer fees. That pipe was their lifeline. Once Riverbend owned the easement, the HOA's pump line crossed my property and a company I controlled. Knowledge nugget number 2. An HOA can't use or maintain land it doesn't have an active easement or license for, no matter how long they've done it. Precedent, 2013, South Carolina appellate ruling. I told no one except Carmen and Eddie. The three of us met in my garage, documents spread across the hood of my pickup. Eddie tapped the deed with his finger. "That's your secret weapon right there. Let them dig deeper. Every inch is trespass now." Carmen smiled faintly. "Patience, gentlemen. The longer they operate that pump, the larger the damages accrue. Let's get them comfortable." I spent the next month playing dumb. I attended HOA meetings, sat quietly while Marlene bragged about our new irrigation network. She called it her legacy project. The irony was almost art. Midway through June, she announced a special assessment, $150 per homeowner to expand the pump shed and install compliance upgrades. Neighbors murmured but voted yes. She wielded fear like a shepherd's crook. During the open floor, I raised my hand. "Just curious, do we have a recorded easement for that new line?" Her smile faltered, then reformed. "Our attorney confirmed we have implied rights. Everyone benefits from this project." "Implied isn't recorded," I said. "You might want to double-check the plat." She leaned into the mic. "Mr. Knox, this isn't your personal lake anymore. It's a shared asset." The room went silent. I just nodded and took my seat. Carmen's plan was working. Draw the confession into the minutes. After the meeting, I slipped outside. The summer air smelled of wet clay and exhaust. Leo was waiting in his county truck, windows down. "You ready for their next move?" he asked. "They'll push harder." "Exactly. Expect a compliance inspection soon. Fake, of course." He was right again. Within a week, 2 board members showed up with clipboards claiming to verify shoreline safety. I asked for their credentials. They muttered something about delegated authority. I filmed the encounter, time-stamped it, and emailed the footage to Carmen. Knowledge nugget number 3. Selective enforcement voids penalties if rules aren't applied equally. They'd ignored another member's unpermitted dock for years. That video would later become Exhibit C. That evening, Eddie and I watched the sunset fade over what remained of the lake. He handed me a beer. "You're patient for an engineer." "Patience is math," I said. "You calculate decay before collapse." He nodded, then added, "You sure about going public when this hits? Folks can turn quick when it's neighbor against neighbor." "I'm not after revenge," I said. "Just balance, and maybe a little accountability." As the last light faded, I looked at the pond's edge, mud cracking, minnows stranded in puddles. That's when I decided what the public showdown would look like. Not in court, not online, but right here, at this shoreline. Before I could say more, headlights appeared at the end of the drive. Marlene's SUV slowed, then stopped. She rolled down her window. "Enjoy it while you can," she said. "Next month, the board votes to assume maintenance jurisdiction." I smiled back. "I'll be here for the vote." She drove off. Eddie exhaled. "You think she suspects?" "Not yet," I said, closing the binder. "But she will. And when she did, the first domino would already be falling. So what do you think? Should an HOA ever be allowed to claim implied rights over private property? Where should the legal line be drawn? Tell me below. Your stories might help someone about to face the same battle. The following week, as fireworks echoed from 4th of July celebrations, I received an official notice in the mail. Annual meeting and vote on Common Resource Integration, July 14th. Perfect. I circled the date in red ink and slid the Riverbend deed into my briefcase. The clock had started. July 14th came hot and windless, the kind of afternoon where cicadas drown out common sense. The HOA's annual meeting was held in the community pavilion, a concrete echo chamber dressed up with folding chairs and a Costco snack table. I arrived early, a manila folder tucked under my arm, and the Riverbend Commons deed sealed inside. Carmen was online via Zoom on my phone, muted, but watching. Eddie sat in the back row, silent sentinel with his thermos. Marlene opened the meeting like she owned the county. "Tonight," she declared, "we finalize integration of the Knox Lake into our irrigation network, making it officially part of our shared assets." Applause scattered weakly through the room. She glanced at me as if to say, "Checkmate." When the floor opened for comments, I rose, calm and slow. "Madam President," I said, "before you vote, I'd like the record to reflect that your irrigation pipe runs through property recently purchased by Riverbend Commons LLC. That easement is now privately held." Her brows knit. "That's impossible. That land's always been part of the Commons." I slid a certified copy of the deed across the table. The clack of the binder rings echoed like a gavel. "Filed June 27th, recorded July 2nd. You'll see Section 14, Lot Buffer C, 15 feet of drainage easement now privately owned. You've been operating your pump on private land for 3 months." Gasps. Someone dropped a water bottle. Marlene flipped through the pages, hands trembling. "Even if that's true, this board has implied rights. Implied isn't recorded," I said again softly. "And you've collected assessments for a facility on land you don't control. That's misappropriation under Section 33-31-831 of the State Nonprofit Act." Eddie muttered, "Boom," just loud enough to be heard. The HOA attorney, a slick man named Pierce Dalton, tried to salvage it. "This is a minor technicality," he said, smoothing his tie. "We'll rectify the record." Carmen's voice came through my speaker. "Correction, Mr. Dalton. Any continued operation after notice constitutes willful trespass. I'd advise immediate shutdown pending legal review." Marlene's face went the color of overripe tomatoes. "You're bluffing, Daniel." I walked to the window, gesturing toward the far hill where Leo's county truck idled. "Then you can tell that to the county inspector waiting outside. He's here on an anonymous complaint about unpermitted infrastructure. I suggest transparency." A hush fell over the room. Leo entered, uniform crisp, badge gleaming. "Evening, folks," he said. "Just need to verify a few things." The board scattered like pigeons. Marlene stood her ground. "You don't have jurisdiction." Leo raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, county code enforcement always has jurisdiction when unpermitted pumps tie into municipal stormwater. Step aside." Visual beat number 1. The moment his clipboard slammed shut and the room went dead quiet. He confirmed what we already knew: no permit, no inspection, and backflow risk to the public system. "You'll need to cease operations immediately," he told her. "Any continued pumping will result in daily fines, $500 per day per violation." Marlene's voice cracked. "We didn't know." "You were informed," Leo said, nodding toward me. "Multiple times." The meeting adjourned in chaos. I walked out into tea. Humid night, adrenaline pulsing slow and steady. Eddie clapped me on the back. "First domino, son. You just tipped it." That evening, I sat on the porch and watched the reflection of porch light flicker over the drained basin. My daughter joined me, barefoot. "Did we win?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "Winning's when it never happens again." The next week brought the retaliation I'd expected. Online posts, anonymous complaints to zoning, even a wellness check from county deputies after someone claimed I was unstable. They found me in the yard repairing the dock, calm as a monk. The deputies apologized. They'd been through HOA nonsense before. Knowledge nugget number 4. Harassment via false reports is prosecutable under state misuse statutes, especially when patterned. I documented every incident with timestamps and incident numbers. If you've ever been harassed like this by your HOA, fake calls, endless fines, how far should homeowners be allowed to push back? Comment below. Should civil suits be automatic after 3 false claims, or is there a better system? By August, the HOA's insurer had launched an internal audit. Carmen said quietly, "When their insurer calls, that's when the board starts eating itself." And she was right again. One by one, small cracks appeared. Treasurer resignations, missing meeting minutes, contradictory emails. Eddie called it bureaucratic rust. Still, Marlene wasn't done. She issued an emergency motion to reclassify the lake as critical infrastructure, an attempt to override property rights via safety statute. Bold move, legally reckless. Carmen smiled when I told her. Let them vote. That motion requires public notice and county approval, which means, drumroll, it's open to public comment. I grinned, and public comment means I get a microphone. That night, under a ceiling fan humming like a slow blade, I drafted my speech. Short, factual, lethal. The kind of truth that doesn't shout, it stings. The county hearing was set for August 30th, 6:00 p.m. in the municipal auditorium, the same room where my wife once received her Teacher of the Year plaque. And that was when I realized, this wasn't just about a pond. It was about the right to keep promises made to the dead, and to protect the living from paper tyrants. The auditorium smelled like old carpet and coffee burned hours ago. I took my seat near the front, leather folder in my lap, while the board shuffled papers on the dais. Marlene wore her red blazer, the one she used for every power play. Her fingers drummed the tabletop in quick bursts, the rhythm of a woman rehearsing control. When the clerk called Item 4B, reclassification of Knox Lake as critical infrastructure, the fluorescent lights buzzed louder, as if the building itself wanted in on the tension. Pierce, the HOA attorney, stood first. Ladies and gentlemen, this amendment will ensure stable water resources for our community and mitigate drought risks. It's a matter of shared responsibility. Then came my turn. I stood, adjusted the mic. Daniel Knox, owner of Parcel 14B. I oppose this motion because it is built on theft. Gasps again. Always that ripple when truth cuts clean. This so-called lake was drained by unauthorized pumps, installed without permit, on land never deeded to the HOA. It is not infrastructure. It is my property. A reporter from Greenville now typed furiously in the second row. Leo sat 2 seats behind her, arms crossed, uniform crisp. I opened the folder and spread out photographs. Trucks pumping water, timestamps, the deed transfer to Riverbend, the inspection report. Each paper slap echoed down the hall like gunfire. These are facts. You can see the plat, recorded July 2nd. You can read the inspection memo, backflow risk confirmed. You can review the CCRs ending exactly 18 feet short of my shoreline. This isn't shared responsibility. It's trespass disguised as community service. Marlene snatched the mic. You're twisting this for revenge. We acted in good faith. Then show the permit, I said. Silence. The county hearing officer cleared his throat. Mr. Dalton, do you have documentation proving permit issuance? Pierce shuffled papers that didn't exist. We're still locating. Then this meeting cannot proceed under Administrative Code 44209, the officer said, tapping his gavel once. The motion is suspended pending investigation. Visual beat number 2. The moment the mic cord trembled under the fluorescent glare, rain streaking the windows as applause broke out from the back rows. Neighbors I didn't know standing for the first time. As I walked out, thunder cracked overhead. Eddie followed, grinning like a proud uncle. You just turned her irrigation project into a criminal inquiry. That night, the retaliation reached its peak. At 11:42 p.m., my porch camera caught 2 shadows dumping trash bags by the driveway. Broken fence planks, old hoses, dead plants. A note taped to one, "Enjoy your lake." I didn't call the cops. I just photographed it, logged the timestamp, and swept it into a single contractor bag labeled Evidence, HOA Harassment. Carmen would need it. By morning, Marlene's allies were already spinning the narrative. Posts about a bitter widower sabotaging community progress filled the neighborhood feed. My daughter saw one before school. "Dad, why do they hate you?" she asked quietly. I knelt beside her. Because some people mistake silence for weakness. But silence is just patience wearing armor. She nodded, still unsure. If you've ever had a neighbor weaponize social media or HOA rumors against you, how did you respond? Did you fight back publicly or keep receipts and wait? I'm curious, what works better where you live? That afternoon, Carmen called with an edge in her voice. Good news and bad. The county has opened a compliance case, but Marlene's pushing a safety inspection of your dock through an emergency clause. Expect them tomorrow." I laughed once. Let them come. The dock's cleaner than their bylaws. Still, the fear crawled in after sunset. Every creak outside sounded like a step. I double-checked the locks, turned on exterior lights, and wrote my daughter's name in the front of my binder, just in case anything happened. The next day, 2 men in reflective vests arrived unannounced. I filmed from the porch. Name and department? They hesitated. HOA maintenance subcontractors. Under whose authority? One mumbled, "Board directive." I nodded toward the road. "This is private property. Trespass again and I'll call county enforcement." They left without another word. By August 22nd, the HOA's insurer suspended coverage pending investigation. Carmen emailed the notice. "This is the death rattle." Eddie read it twice. "You think she'll resign?" "No," I said. "Cornered people don't step down. They dig." And dig she did. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived accusing me of interfering with community governance and threatening a $10,000 lawsuit for defamation and obstruction. I opened it, scanned the letterhead, then slid it into a plastic sleeve labeled Exhibit G, Retaliation. I didn't even bother calling Carmen. She'd told me once, "Desperation writes its own confession." That night, lightning crawled across the sky, lighting up the cracked lakebed like a scar. I realized the moment was near. The board's emergency hearing, their last gasp before collapse. I poured a coffee, checked my notes, and whispered to the night, "Tomorrow, we stop playing defense." The HOA board called their emergency hearing for 6 p.m., Friday, August 29th. Same pavilion, same elastic chairs, same illusion of authority. I wore a plain gray shirt, no tie. Looked like a man who'd already won but wasn't flaunting it. Carmen was 2 rows behind, quietly flipping her legal pad. Eddie leaned on the back wall, coffee in hand. Leo had promised to swing by in uniform, just in case they tried anything unlawful. Marlene started the meeting with forced cheer. "We're here tonight to address false and defamatory claims circulated against this board." Her voice quivered. "We've suffered enough reputational harm to warrant immediate action." Pierce followed, reading from a script. "Mr. Knox has engaged in obstruction of community functions, harassment of board members, and unauthorized recordings in violation of privacy laws." That last line was meant to sting, but I smiled. Carmen whispered, "Let him finish digging." When he stopped, I stepped forward, calm and slow, binder tucked against my ribs. "Everything I recorded occurred on my property during public HOA functions in a one-party consent state. Every second is admissible." Pierce blinked. "You can't." "Knowledge nugget number 5, I said, voice steady. "South Carolina is a one-party consent jurisdiction. As long as one participant is aware, it's legal. I was that participant." A murmur spread across the room. Marlene's composure fractured. "We'll file civil action," she barked. "Then file it," I said. "But before you do, I need to introduce Exhibit H." I laid down a single sheet, the county's cease and desist order, stamped 2 days prior, instructing the HOA to halt all water extraction immediately. Violating this order carries a fine of up to $2,000 per day. As of this morning, your pump was still running. That's 6 days, $12,000 and counting. Pierce tried to grab the document. I placed my hand flat on it first. "Touch that, and you're tampering with evidence." Eddie let out a low whistle. I turned toward the dozen neighbors who'd shown up out of curiosity. "Folks, I've lived here 15 years, paid every fee on time. My wife and I built that lake with our own hands, cemented permits, inspections, every inch by the book. And this board decided to drain it without consent, then fine me for defending what I own." Someone in the crowd muttered, "He's right." Another nodded. Marlene slammed her gavel. "Order!" But the order was already gone. The county sheriff entered then. Leo had made the call when he heard voices raised. He walked up to the table, adjusted his hat, and looked directly at her. "Ma'am, are you continuing operations on a site under active county injunction?" She hesitated. "That's classified HOA matter." He nodded slowly. "Then consider this your official notice. Any further operation is criminal contempt. I'll need the keys to the pump shed." Visual beat number 1 had been the first confrontation. This, unmistakably, was visual beat number 2. The sheriff's open hand, the heavy metal keychain trembling in hers before she finally dropped it into his palm. He turned to me. "Mr. Knox, as property owner of record, you have authority to secure the site. Recommend changing locks tonight." "Yes, sir," I said, barely breathing. When he left, the meeting dissolved into noise. Angry murmurs, paper rustling, chairs scraping. Marlene's red blazer looked wilted. She whispered something to Pierce and hurried out a side door. Eddie leaned close. "You just buried them without raising your voice." Carmen exhaled, her pen tapping once against her pad. "Now we wait for the insurer and the county to finish the burial." But the next 72 hours were not quiet. I woke to vandalized mailbox paint, black spray over my address, a tire slash. Someone dumped gravel at the end of my drive to block it. I didn't flinch. I just photographed, time-stamped, and filed police reports. Still, the pressure built. My daughter had nightmares of strangers at the window. That night I told her, "This ends soon. You'll sleep without worry again." She nodded, half believing. And I meant it, because behind the chaos, Carmen was finalizing something bigger, the final weapon hidden in the fine print. Reversal number 1, the secret leverage, was now complete. The HOA's irrigation easement, their pump, and even their insurance all ran through property controlled by Riverbend Commons. Their entire operation depended on a lease they didn't know existed, because I'd filed it through a trust Carmen managed. One clause gave us the right to terminate their access with 24 hours notice for any violation. That violation had now been proven, signed, sealed, and stamped by the county sheriff himself. Carmen called it the quiet nuke. She drafted a termination notice dated September 1st, effective immediately. We'd serve it at the next open meeting, with press invited and county oversight present. I asked her, "What happens after?" "We negotiate reforms," she said. "We'll trade reinstatement for governance change. That's your second reversal, Daniel." "Reform instead of ruin," I murmured. She smiled. "Exactly. Justice with a pulse." "If you followed this far, how would you handle it? Tear the HOA down completely or demand reform? I want to know what kind of justice people believe in. Leave it below, or at least like the video so it reaches someone who's still scared to fight." That night, I stood by the drained lake one last time before the showdown. The air was thick with crickets, damp with summer's last breath. I ran my hand along the dock rail my wife once painted, whispering to the dark, "Tomorrow, this ends right." And as the porch light flickered over the empty basin, I knew the next sunrise would belong to the truth. The next sunrise felt sharper than the ones before it. Clear air, no humidity. Even the birds sounded like they'd rehearsed a soundtrack for closure. I dressed slow, pressed shirt, dark jeans, boots scuffed, but honest. On the counter, Carmen's termination notice waited inside a plastic sleeve, bold letters across the header. Lease revocation and reform proposal. I slid it into my binder, checked my daughter's lunch, kissed her forehead, and promised, "This is the last meeting I'll ever have to go to about this place." By 5:55 p.m., the pavilion was packed. Word had spread. Local TV vans idled by the curb, antennas poking at the sky. Leo was already there, standing near the entrance like a quiet wall of calm authority. Eddie handed me a small American flag lapel pin. "For optics," he said. "Folks like a patriot, not a rebel." Marlene called the meeting to order, voice thin as paper. "Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that disruptions or defamatory statements will result in removal." Her lawyer, Pierce, leaned toward her, whispering fast. The tremor in her hand gave her away. When she opened the floor, I stepped forward, laid my binder on the podium, and looked straight into the small crowd. Neighbors, reporters, maybe 50 people in all. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to finish what your rules started." I lifted the top sheet, read clearly. Riverbend Commons, LLC, owner of easement parcel C, hereby terminates the lease granting the Homeowners Association right of passage and use for irrigation purposes, effective immediately, due to willful non-compliance with County Injunction 17-48A. This revocation is lawful and binding under Recorded Title Reference 09-311-554. A low buzz rippled through the audience. Pierce shot up from his chair. "You can't revoke our access without board consent." I turned the next page, Carmen's notarized statement. I did, and held it high. The lease gives the owner sole discretion, no consent required. He sputtered. You'll bankrupt the HOA. Then consider this your alternative. I slid the final page across the podium. A reform charter. You agree to 8 changes, and Riverbend will reinstate access under a renewable community stewardship license. The clerk read the list aloud, her voice steady and clear. Board term limits, maximum of 2 consecutive 3-year terms. Transparent voting, ballots counted publicly, results posted within 24 hours. Independent ethics committee with resident volunteers and legal oversight. Fee rollback to pre-2020 rates pending audit. Mandatory open records for all contracts and invoices. Community access charter guaranteeing equal rights to common spaces. Annual third-party audit published to all residents. Restoration plan for Knox Lake funded by HOA reserves within 90 days. Marlene stared at the paper like it was written in flame. You think you can blackmail us into policy change? I met her eyes. No, ma'am. I'm giving you a choice between extinction and evolution. Leo stepped forward, calm but unmistakable. He's within his rights. County records confirm the lease is valid. If the HOA wants water, they'll have to agree to terms or shut it down entirely. Visual beat number 2 had been that key drop. This moment, her signature trembling under a reporter's camera flash, became visual beat number 3. The vote came next. 6 board members total. 3 voted yes, 1 abstained, 1 resigned mid-vote, and Marlene, last to speak, looked around, saw the cameras, and whispered, "Fine." The word broke her like dry bark. Applause erupted, loud and long. Eddie laughed so hard his thermos rattled. Carmen squeezed my arm and said, "That's reversal number 2, Daniel. You just turned a vendetta into governance reform." The sheriff nodded. "Nicely done, sir. Legal and clean." As the crowd thinned, a young father I barely knew came up and shook my hand. "Didn't think anyone could beat them," he said. "Guess we needed an engineer." I smiled. "No, just a neighbor who reads the fine print." If you've been watching this play out and you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Burn the system down or fix it from the inside like this? I'm curious what you think real justice looks like in a neighborhood. Outside, the sun dropped behind the trees, painting the drained lake gold. Reporters caught their sound bites. Cameras folded away. When I finally packed my binder, I slipped the flag pin into the pocket where my wife's old keychain used to hang. It felt right. Quiet victory, lawful and earned. But I wasn't done yet. Reform on paper was just ink. Real change would need roots, new committees, new volunteers, real transparency. Carmen had drafted a timeline for implementation. The county would monitor for 6 months. I'd agreed to serve as interim community liaison. Eddie grinned when he heard. From rebel to regulator, that's poetic. Let's see if they like the new me, I said. The following week, the HOA website announced a public restoration kickoff for Knox Lake. Every resident was invited. And that's when I knew how this story had to end, with water flowing again. Not for me, but for everyone who'd watched their community rot under silence. The following Saturday dawned quiet, sunlight skipping over the calm lake like it had finally forgiven the world. The smell of fresh soil and cut grass mixed in the air. A few neighbors had gathered, coffee in hand, watching as Eddie and I knelt beside a hole near the new wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Silver Pines. Respect lives here." The young oak's roots were wrapped in burlap, damp and alive. Eddie's hands trembled slightly as he cut the twine. "You realize this is poetic, right?" he said. We drained the water, then planted a tree." I smiled. "Balance takes patience. Water finds its way back." Behind us, the HOA's new board members stood chatting with county staff, blueprints for the restoration plan pinned to a clipboard. Marlene wasn't there. She'd resigned quietly after the county cited her for willful negligence. Her replacement, a mild-mannered retiree named Judith Hall, approached with a clipboard of her own. "Mr. Knox, we've approved the reform charter. The audit starts Monday." "Transparency begins with daylight," I said, shaking her hand. Carmen arrived a few minutes later, sunglasses perched on her head. "You did it, Daniel. A reform clause signed, audits mandated, and a lake restoration funded by their own reserves. You even got term limits." Justice with a pulse, I said, echoing her words from weeks ago. Leo stopped by too, still in uniform, waving a cup of gas station coffee. Pumps sealed, fines processed, no appeals pending, he reported. Your community's about to be a model case study for HOA governance. Eddie grunted. About time someone made headlines for the right reason. I looked around. The neighbors smiling, kids running near the dock, the faint shimmer of clear water already creeping back into the lakebed. Redemption doesn't roar. It rustles quietly, like leaves waking in the wind. We packed the soil around the oak, tamping it firm. Eddie pressed his boot against the edge. Think it'll make it? Yeah, I said. It's got deep roots and enough light. Same as this place. He nodded. You ever gonna tell folks what Riverbend really was? Maybe one day, I said. For now, I'd rather let them think the community saved itself. That afternoon, Carmen handed me a thin envelope. From the county press office. They want a quote for the write-up. I scribbled on the back of my clipboard. When rules serve people, not power, commu. 90s heal. The law doesn't destroy, it steadies. We just had to remember that. She smiled. That's your next video title right there. I laughed softly. Maybe after a vacation. If you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend, or for the neighbor who once stood alone at a meeting and didn't give up. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And if you know someone still stuck under a broken HOA, share this so they see there's a lawful way out. That's on us. The sun rose higher, glinting off the newly filled water line. Kids cheered as the first fish truck backed down the ramp. The sign caught the light just right. Respect lives here. In the distance, a county drone filmed the restoration. Reporters would later write about the Silver Pines precedent, a case study in accountability, term limits, and civic renewal. Insurance underwriters adjusted their risk models. Developers called it a wake-up. 3 months later, a scholarship fund was created for local students pursuing public administration, named after my late wife, the Emma Knox Civic Integrity Award. The first recipient used the grant to study environmental law. As for me, I still keep the old binder, tabs worn and pages marked with coffee stains. It sits on my shelf labeled Case 1. Because somewhere out there, another HOA has forgotten its boundaries, and when that call comes, I'll be ready to remind them. Next case, I whispered to the wind, patting the soil over the oak's roots. The leaves flickered in answer, sunlight flashing through green like applause.